Good morning, Bill Gates. Welcome to the show. Great to have you here. You are thinking a lot about the biggest threats of this world, the climate crisis, the energy crisis, and the health crisis as well, and how to solve them with the help of technology. And we're going to talk about all that today. But before we do this, I would like to start with a little experiment, a little journey through time. What will this world look like in, let's say, 10 to 15 years from now? Will we be better off, or will we see big disasters unfolding and understand that the best time for humanity is over, as some say?
Well, the general trend in the human condition is very positive, whether it's lifespan or saving children's lives or preventing cancer or malaria deaths. Humans are very innovative, and that's a constant aggregation of knowledge. In fact, the speed of innovation is actually accelerating somewhat. Now, you have to lay next to that the chance of big setbacks. A pandemic is a big setback, a financial crisis. Certainly the war in Ukraine is a stunning setback. And then we have some problems that if we don't get going on them, like climate change, will get worse and worse. And therefore that requires action. But on balance, it'll be far better to be born, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, than now. The last 200 years, the human condition has improved dramatically, not without some setbacks. But I'm thrilled at what's going on in medicine and digital tools that are kind of primal elements to help drive innovation.
So you basically say that innovation, new technology will somehow solve the biggest problems. Do you argue with technologies that still have to be invented, or is everything on the table already?
Well, in digital things, like making sure everyone has a bank account and good financial advice, there's so many things yet to be done. Particularly in the low-income countries. I mean, the conditions there are still far tougher than we'd like, even though they've improved a lot. So humanity will never be without problems. But overall, the number of people surviving disease, who are literate, who have a good education, those are some things that we can fundamentally improve.
So even when we start with this very optimistic outlook, we have to talk about the big threats. And I would be interested, which one is the most underestimated threat for human security you are seeing right now?
Well, we have to be able to work on multiple fronts all at once and not just a single thing. The challenge of war and the use of weapons, including nuclear weapons or, even more extreme weapons of bioterrorism, that, we've had in the past, and now to some degree, we're seeing what an incredible tragedy it is, not just for the country that's affected, but also for the entire world. Things like, food supplies, fertilizer costs, diversion of resources to the war that ideally would have gone to help the low-income countries. And so right now, our focus on helping Africa is not as strong as it was before the war was there. And, that's tough because Europe, including Germany's generosity to help developing countries, has been fantastic. And so, in the work I do at the Gates Foundation, where we have a lot of focus on helping uplift Africa, I can't wait for somehow the war to end, and so we can get back to that work being a higher priority.
So you think in all these multiple crises that are happening to us at the moment, the poorer country are somehow forgotten?
Yes, the relative focus on on those countries is down quite a bit. I mean, you have the energy costs, the defense costs, the refugee costs. Europe's agenda is a very full agenda, and yet historically, over 60% of the resources that help those poor countries come from the generosity of Europe, and including the big three: UK, France, and Germany. And understandably, those budgets are stretched in a very dramatic way, particularly as we overlay the fact that the climate challenges ideally would be additional money to help those countries, so not having to buy less vaccines in order to take climate action.
So what happens if we don't change that direction? And I mean, you see the policies all over Europe, all over the world. Billions are going into buying weapons, investment in this defense industry. So what happens if this doesn't change?
Well, we certainly improve the world a lot slower than if we didn't have the war. The cost of the war is pretty unbelievable. The cost of the pandemic was pretty unbelievable. I mean, we still have medical care deficits, people who were depressed during those times, education that didn't take place, not to mention the ongoing disease, and then these deficits that were created in many, many countries around the world that, don't come for free. And so, the pandemic was a huge setback, and the Ukraine war was a huge setback. And, we can say to ourselves, okay, how do we end those things and be better prepared? In the case of the pandemic, I'm a bit shocked at how quickly we're not really debating what should the global response have looked like, and are we investing in being ready for a future pandemic?
I think we have to talk a little bit how the pandemic has changed the world. I mean, you already warned back in 2015 in TED Talks and elsewhere that the world isn't ready for the pandemic. Everybody knows that. Has the pandemic actually changed the world? Has the world learned from what happened during the Corona crisis? And is the world anti-pandemic infrastructure better today, or do we just move?
It's better, but it's not adequate. That is, if another pandemic, like a flu, say an H5N1, started to having human-to-human transmissibility, we are truly not ready for that. We have some things like the mRNA vaccine platform,
yes,
that companies like CureVac, BioNTech,
that you invested in pretty early, actually.
Absolutely. Both of those companies based in Germany were doing great innovative science, and both of them want to take this mRNA approach and apply it to critical issues like HIV, TB, and malaria. And so we, celebrate that incredible scientists and back those companies.
So do you think the COVID crisis is over now? I mean, even in Germany, masks are disappearing from the public sphere now. So is that history now?
There'll still be a level of deaths. The public is very binary. Either a threat reaches a level of deaths that people go, okay, I can't go out, we shouldn't do public gatherings. Mm-hmm. But once it gets below a certain threshold, we almost want to act like it's not there. And so there are still COVID deaths. Some of those are people who haven't kept their vaccines up to date, but even some of them are people who have kept the vaccines up to date. We don't think currently that we're going to see another gigantic spike. That is, the ongoing immune levels of people are somewhat being maintained, but we have to be wary of that because the variants that came along were a surprise to us. Omicron, fortunately, even though it was dramatically more infectious, it turned out that the disease causing was actually quite a bit less than the previous variant. So, we need to stay vigilant there, and we need to build the ability to practice and have a global, what I call emergency health corps, that's making sure countries are ready, and that in the same way we practice for fire or earthquake or war, that pandemics joins that list. And so instead of being completely unrehearsed, we have better tools and we move into action far more quickly and ideally stop outbreaks from growing global.
Let me just ask a quick question. Back to your TED Talk 2015, where you talk about the next pandemic. So if you would have hold a TED Talk again, what is the next big health threat you would warn today?
Well, a pandemic, in terms of surprise increase in deaths, say 10 million excess deaths, the biggest threat to the world still is another pandemic. Mm-hmm. You have naturally caused pandemics, and someday we may have intentionally caused pandemics, or what we call bioterrorism. And we haven't beefed up our global institutions to really have us practice being ready, because the speed of response in these things makes a dramatic difference. So I'd say, the greatest risk for a surprise in rich countries is still another pandemic, maybe a flu this time. For the world at large, we have the ongoing infectious diseases, including HIV, malaria, TB, and we have, massive malnutrition that holds back human potential. And so, we should build on the incredible success of things like Gavi and Global Fund. The childhood deaths have been cut in half since the turn of the century, and we need to cut them in half again. Those are in the United Nations goals, but right now, we're way behind on all of those, and it's not getting as much attention as it was getting even a few years ago.
It's also because there are so many big crises we have close to our lives, especially in Europe, for example. We talk a lot about the energy crisis, and I always find it interesting to see how much energy and the future of our energy systems is somehow the topic, one of the main topics of your life. I've just read that your first high school job was writing software for the entity that controls the power grid in the northwest of the United States. You've written books about the clean energy future. You've invested in moonshot technology like nuclear fusion and so on. We are going to talk about this in a minute, but for now, I know that you're traveling to Europe quite often. So when you come to Europe at the moment, what do you see there? How has the energy crisis changed this continent? Is it on a quicker path to the clean energy future, or somehow did it stop the green revolution because coal and gas are having this big comeback at the moment?
Well, I think it's done both things. It has hurt the near-term emissions goals. So Europe, understandably, to keep the lights on and people from freezing and keep industry running, has turned back and reduced the progress towards a clean energy. And that's fully understandable. At the same time, that dependence on natural gas coming from other countries, particularly Russia, it's now seen that in the 10 to 20-year time frame, that the goals of climate and the goals of energy security align to say that investment in green infrastructure is even more of a priority than it was before the war. And so sitting and saying, okay, what about local permitting of wind and solar? What about permitting of transmission? Mm-hmm. Every single country in Europe is moving more slowly to develop these green energy sources than we need to achieve our climate goals. And cutting through regulatory challenges, whether it's transmission within a country or cross-border transmission, it's been too easy to say no. And so I do think the war, which is mostly a terrible tragedy, it will energize the recognition that the status quo, anything that's slowing down that transition, where regulatory things would be very high on that list, that the trade-offs are going to have to be made, and the politics of that are challenging. But Europe is impressive. The commitment to make changes for climate, even to look at border adjustment. There's no doubt Europe is the leader on that. The sincerity of those commitments, every time I meet with the Commission or, the country politicians, Germany has a coalition that includes the Green Party, and they're very serious about making sure climate is a priority. So it's a plus, but the near-term metrics are going to be very disappointing.
Mm. So this coalition you just mentioned will turn off the remaining nuclear power plants in a couple of weeks. Is that a smart move in the situation we are in at the moment?
I mean, it's totally, they were elected to make hard decisions. Personally, I'd keep the nuclear on because I see the benefit of that clean energy and relative to the safety concerns as being net beneficial. So I don't know how quickly those will get turned off. Third generation nuclear, which is what we have today, there's not going to be many new reactors built. The best hope for nuclear is if we could get a completely new generation, and I'm biased because I'm involved in that, where the countries that are committed to nuclear prove it out and show that the economic, safety, waste management is handled. And then the other countries who are less engaged can look at that and see what they think, give it a fresh evaluation. And, that data on that won't be in for almost another 8 years or so.
Because at the moment, the waste problem, this is always this debate in Germany. So the waste problem is not solved, right? So with the current generation of nuclear power plants, we still have that problem. And that's one of the main reasons they are going to be turned off in the next couple of weeks in Germany.
The waste problem should not be a reason to not do nuclear. The amount of waste involved, the ability to do geological sequestration, that's not a reason not to do nuclear. But everyone accepts that France is going to be part of trying to build the next generation of reactors and that Germany is not. And, if that succeeds, hopefully German is open-minded. But, that's a question for the future.
Sorry for interrupting, but maybe explain a little bit more why the waste problem shouldn't be one anymore.
The total amount of waste and the ability to geologically sequester that waste and the cost of doing that, that's not a huge problem. It can be put in places in so-called deep boreholes where it stays geologically for hundreds of millions of years. So, and the amount we're talking about, when we talk about CO2, we're talking about a really something gigantic, and sequestering that, may not be possible because it's like 1 million times more than what you're talking about. The total waste, say the US was completely nuclear powered, it's a few rooms worth of total waste. So not, it's not a gigantic thing. The reason nuclear failed is two other reasons. The economics of building reactors was very poor.
Yeah.
And the concerns about third generation safety were very high.
Okay. So what would be your recommendation for a country like Germany that has a huge industrial sector? Is 100% renewables ever possible, or would you recommend to just let the nuclear reactors running?
Well, first of all, the way that Europe is going to have energy reliability is by not solving the problem country by country. You can have periods where the wind and sun just aren't available. And so having a trans-European grid is absolutely necessary to maximize the amount of renewable energy you you can use. And there's no doubt Europe should build renewable energy as fast as it can and build transmission as fast as it can. Even if we have, miraculous storage and some nuclear in the mix, we're going to need that renewable energy. And it's going too slow today. And so that needs to be examined. There's no storage capability right now that is cheap enough that would let you get to 100% renewable. Now, I'm invested in lots of storage companies that are, making advances, but we need to pursue every path that may give us this big green grid: nuclear fusion, nuclear fission, storage, all these technologies, because to maintain reliability and low cost with zero emissions, that's one of the hardest things mankind has ever done.
Speaking of your investments, you founded Breakthrough Energy in 2015 as an somehow umbrella brand to further the most ambitious innovation programs the world has ever seen. That's the description. That's a pretty bold goal. What are the next breakthroughs you will finance? What are the technologies you are looking at the moment?
Yeah, so in 2015, when the Paris Climate Accords get signed, which was fantastic, there was a side conference called Mission Innovation. And that's when I made the commitment to build Breakthrough Energy, so that as government labs and universities have ideas about clean technologies, there would be risk capital from Breakthrough Energy and others to push those companies forward. Today, we have over 100 companies. We have great co-investors in those companies, and that's to solve cement, steel, planes, boats, meat, you name it, every source of emission. We have many innovative companies because we want to make the cost of being clean not higher than the cost of doing it today, what I call the green premium, driving that to zero. And so in each of those areas, we're seeing great progress. Green hydrogen is one that gets talked about a lot. There's many approaches there. We have 4 companies that I'm very excited about. And those aren't the only ones. The flourishing of clean innovation is partly why I think we will solve the problem, even though the short-term metrics aren't going well.
So my question was a bit more asking, because we know what you have invested in already, but we would like to know what you're looking at the moment. So what are the next big breakthroughs you think you might invest in, but what are you interested in at the moment?
Well, we're driving we have the 100 companies, and we'll continue to invest. There's more that needs to be done in areas like food. There's more that needs to be done in buildings. We're looking at how we can use innovation, not just for mitigation, but also adaptation. But the 100 companies we have, a lot of them are still in the lab. So they're not making cement at scale or steel at scale. And so a big agenda for the next 5 years is to take these advances that are looking great in the lab and actually build these plants, scale them up. And some of them will fail, but that's part of going full speed ahead, is this big project deployment to get on the learning curve.
So scouting is not the mission anymore, it's more scaling now, right?
Both. I'd put scaling as an even higher priority, but we're still scouting.
All right. So let's look into Europe again, because when we talk about what we do and how we see ourselves in Europe, we always say, okay, this is the big chance for Europe, and we might be leading in this whole energy transformation, but also the green transformation of industries. Is that actually what you see as well? So in what fields is Europe actually leading, and where do we fall behind?
Well, the commitment to climate is stronger in Europe than anywhere else. And that is a huge benefit to the world, that it's on the agenda, and Europe is going to lead the way. The U.S. is now falling in line somewhat with recent policy, and we need that as well. basically, as Europe drives its emissions to zero, and it's got lots of great companies at the forefront of that. As it does it, it can't do it in a brute force way that's expensive, because when we go to the middle income countries, the Chinas, the Indias, the countries which are most the emissions and where most people live, we can't say to them it has this huge premium cost. And so, the work that was done to bring down the cost of solar, the work that was done for new battery technologies, we have to do that again. This time we'd like to see not only the innovations happen, but also the eventual factories and building and the jobs there to bring in these new jobs to replace, say, the coal mining and other hydrocarbon-related jobs that over time will go away.
But to be honest, you just mentioned two fields Europe is pretty much falling behind. I mean, battery is happening in Asia, solar power is happening in China. So what fields is still in what fields do you actually look to Europe, because you say, okay, here you have great innovative companies, maybe more than anywhere else in the world?
Well, certainly the both onshore and offshore wind, Europe is very strong. Now, some of those companies, because these regulatory impediments, they're not seeing the demand for their products is growing as fast, particularly onshore wind is a bit challenged right now. There is a next generation of batteries coming. There's a next generation of solar panels coming. So even though China won the first 2 rounds there's still a lot that can be done.
Okay.
Definitely in areas like steel and cement and clean hydrogen, or even electric cars, it's up in the air, where that leadership will come. And we need Europe to be a big part of that.
Recently, there has been big breakthroughs in nuclear fusion. Is that this revolution actually happening sooner than everybody thought, or is that still decades away?
The uncertainty level is very high. So even though we should invest even more in nuclear fusion, and there's many, many companies, over 14 of which I'm invested in 4 of them, we still can't count on it. The economics, the tritium handling, there's a lot of challenges. And so we need to push forward, but we still need to invest in nuclear fission. We need to invest in massive storage. It's not optional to have a solution for climate. And so to have the greatest chance of success, each of these things needs to be pursued. In 5 years, we'll see. Some of the companies have incredible technical milestones that they will or won't achieve in this next 5 years.
It's interesting that you said it's not optional to find a solution for climate, because when you look into the numbers, not so much is actually changing. So, and that's why you say, and many experts do as well, the world won't reach the 1.5 degree goal. So what now is the idea of climate summits every couple of years? Do we need another systems? What has to happen that this goal can be achieved?
Well, the changing out the industrial economy so that we do it in a completely clean way. The scale of what's involved there is extremely large. People should understand how many cement plants are there, how many steel plants are there. These are the key materials of our economy. And so we have to be realistic about how quickly those things can change. We haven't even invented, a cheap way to make these things yet. We need to go faster at that. And every degree of progress we make is better. It's not like because we can't do 1.5, we should give up. We should still do the best we can. The yearly meetings, I personally would prefer that they were every 2 or 3 years, because honestly, in a year, people will just be disappointed, particularly in the face of the war, how much can you get done in a year?
But even when you look back a couple of years, let's look back to Paris, not so much has changed. I mean, the COVID crisis has had an effect, but to be honest, the fundamental development is pretty much the same that it was before. So that's why that was my question. Do we need a different approach?
Well, the world has many priorities. We want to keep our health systems running. We want to, not have Russia take over other countries. We, are managing many things simultaneously. And whenever we raise the prices of things, like we put on a new diesel tax, particularly in the face of the inflation that people are experiencing, if we force these things in, then the voters' willingness to say, okay, this is important, we're really going to test that, because raising prices a lot today for today's voters and saying, okay, this is part of, Europe getting rid of its emissions, which are 15% of global emissions, and, maybe India and China will do their part or not, that's going to be a hard sell. The way I square it is by having Europe and the US drive the innovation that gets it so it's common sense that other countries would adopt those new approaches. But, just saying, hey, let's be tougher about this, runs into the fact that voters, this is not their only priority. As they face inflation and other issues, they're not willing to have the climate budget take over health spending, education spending, and other priorities.
We have to make a hard cut at the moment, because let's look back to Davos, to the World Economic Forum. There was many debates about climate. There were many debates about the war in Ukraine. But I've heard even more debates about the transformation caused by artificial intelligence, especially since ChatGPT has been published a couple of weeks ago. Everybody's talking about generative AI, and that's an AI that can actually create new content out of collected data. What is your take on that? It's often said AI will become as important as the discovery of electricity. Is AI the new operating system of our society?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say operating system, but the most important innovations going on right now are what's going on with AI. These systems, their ability to read and write and help us with a lot of tasks that we wouldn't have used them in before, is going to make a huge impact. Today, they require too much computation. They're not always accurate. They're not integrated into other systems. But even this week, you'll have announcements by Microsoft and Google, where they're competing to lead in this space. I'm biased. I consult still with Microsoft to help them. But, I see in areas like healthcare and education, these AIs can have incredibly positive impacts. I mean, we have health backlogs all over the world, and anything that can make that more efficient is a great gift.
Let's explore a little bit what exactly this this disruption look like. You once said that ChatGPT or this kind of AI is as important as the invention of the internet. I think. What does that mean exactly? What is happening right now?
Okay, the easiest way to understand it is AI's got very good at speech recognition and visual recognition, but they essentially couldn't read. That is, if you handed them a textbook, like biology, and you said, okay, here's a test. Did you really understand what was in this book? They could not do it. These new things, including ChatGPT, as they're trained and tuned and improved, they can read and write in an extremely good way. They're still somewhat error prone. They don't really know when they're making mistakes, but the progress over the next couple of years to make these things even better will be profound. And so we find ourselves with a tool that can make even white-collar type jobs far more efficient, looking at invoices or medical claims or, writing letters. Reading and writing is now within the AI capabilities, and that will have a very broad impact.
We have to talk about what that actually means for jobs in a minute, but before that, you mentioned Microsoft. So ChatGPT, that's the first numbers I could get, reached over 100 million monthly active users in January, which is amazing. I've never seen such tremendous growth ever before, even not with TikTok in the early days. So only 2 months after it has been published. Now, Microsoft will invest billions in the maker of ChatGPT, which is OpenAI. How will this technology change a company like Microsoft? What can you think of will happen in the next couple of years?
Well, today when you use word processor, you do all the writing. It might help with some spelling and grammar, but it's not like, if you say, hey, please write a condolence letter like these other ones I've written, but change the following things. You can't use natural language to tell the word processor what to do. In the future, all your software, you'll just use natural language. So you say, I want a drawing with the sun there and trees there and a cabin there, and boom, it will do it. You'll still have menus to do little touch-ups and things, but whether it's creating documents or images or summarizing material or, trying to find where something is discussed, its ability to read, think of the time that doctors spend with paperwork, that we should be able to get rid of. Think of doctors who don't know the latest article that maybe they should be aware of. That we can help with. Think of a math tutor. Today a one-on-one tutor is very expensive that keeps track of the student's motivation and what they know. And so the AI will be embedded in Microsoft Office, even in Microsoft Teams. If you're discussing your sales results, there'll be the AI will sit in a meeting and you say, hey, what happened in France? You just use natural language and it'll show you exactly what the history is there. So, for the first time, natural language is available for all software activities. And, so Microsoft and all the companies are taking their software, Teams, mail, calendaring, word processing, and putting this in to make workers far more efficient.
Is that actually happening fast now? Because when I have tried to have conversations with my phone, it's basically a lot of misunderstandings, and I don't really get what I want. So is that? Do we overestimate the speed this will have now because everybody's excited of what ChatGPT can do, or did we just reach another level?
We made a breakthrough in terms of these new models get you to an ability to read and write with fluency. And yes, it'll be a few years really getting the errors right, getting the efficient execution, but we're not going back. The amount of R&D in these software companies, these digital companies, is incredible. It's like, greater than government R&D budgets. And all of that is being pushed into, okay, what do I do with AI now that we've reached this threshold of understanding language?
A couple of years back, you warned that millions of people could lose their jobs because of AI in the next 20 years. That was the time when you discussed this robot tax. I don't want to discuss that now again, but what industries will be affected most now in the next couple of years? Who has to be aware what's happening most?
Well, historically, people looked mostly at blue-collar jobs with physical manipulation as the robots became more intelligent. And that's still happening. Inside the factory, the robots will get a lot better. The thing that's new here is that because we can make white-collar jobs more efficient, do you simply take that efficiency and just have higher quality? So like helping a teacher do their job. I don't think we're going to have less teachers, but I do think the AI can help those teachers. I don't think we're going to have less doctors, but we can help them be less overloaded and do a better job. Some document processing jobs will go away. I mean, we don't have as many typists now because we expect everybody to do pretty much their own typing. But some administrative tasks will be automated by this software.
So no millions unemployed because of that technology.
I think the white-collar workers will be able to shift into other roles. The labor market is fairly tight. Now, as these AIs get better and better and better, eventually it could have a big effect on the job market. But for the years ahead, it'll be more about efficiency where there's a shortage of supply or where we're overloading the workers.
Because for now, the shortage is, especially in Europe, is so big that AI is at the moment not fast enough to fill all the jobs humans can't take anymore. But you think in the long run, there can be lots of jobs lost because of that technology. Did I get that right?
Well, in the long run, if society is productive enough, now this is, getting out in the 10-year plus time frame, the need to work the same hours we work today, once we really feel like teaching and healthcare and, helping the elderly and the handicapped, that the labor market is fulfilling everything we need. And as we're more efficient, yes, eventually we will work less than we work today. But in the near term, with these aging societies and these overloads, it'll be mostly about making workers more effective.
So working less sounds not too bad, but somebody has to pay for it. So the robot tax will come back in the debate?
Yes, technology, the way we tax things, you won't want to tax salaries because you want to encourage employment. And so you'll end up changing the tax structures quite a bit. But that's, it's not the key issue. But yes, tax systems aren't designed for this world, this coming world.
Okay. I'm wondering how this will change ever when I see the debates on tax at the moment. But that's not our topic today. We have a very difficult thing to solve still. In an interview with Handelsblatt 2018 already, you were concerned about who controls AI in the future, the United States or China. What do you think now, 5 years later? Still concerned?
Well, every country has access to these techniques. There are a few large companies that have these big cloud computers that help us run these things. But the basic techniques being used are being published in an open way. And so, Chinese companies, European companies, US companies, they have access to the state of the art. And, the competition will be such that there'll be open source offerings, there'll be very low cost licenses available. It's just not, even though Google and Microsoft are two of the leaders, they won't be the only ones who are doing AI software.
Sure, but they will be pretty powerful. So what do you think? Should Europe build its own AI? Because otherwise it will be dependent either from the American or the Chinese AI systems. Is that something Europe should think of?
No, I wouldn't do a region-specific thing. You need to think strategically, okay, can you count on these things? Can you have versions? What's going to happen in the open source world? But there isn't going to be a single supply of AI. It's going to be super competitive and not, there's not a need to build another one because of that. And, whatever European countries want in terms of, no data ever gets sent out and there's special instances, all of that because of the competition, including great Europeans who work for those companies, that'll all be provided.
Right. Okay. A couple of months ago, you talked a little bit about the ethical dimensions of AI, and especially about when it comes to misinformation that is being spread by algorithms of the big tech companies. So before the US midterms last year, you warned that the misuse and disinformation could even cause a civil war. Are you more or less concerned today that this might happen anytime in future or anytime soon?
Well, I'm certainly concerned about political polarization. And, I know the US situation best of all. I wouldn't have expected, people to attack the Capitol or people to deny the validity of election results. I'm in a state of shock about that. We can't blame AI for that. That happened. It may have been magnified by digital channels that allow various conspiracy theories like QAnon or whatever to be blasted out by people who wanted to believe those things. So the digital tools may have played an auxiliary role. The solution to this political polarization isn't going to come through some technology-based thing. And the fact that AIs can generate nonsense. Look, humans are doing a perfectly good job of generating nonsense. So it's a separate problem that I hope other people have solutions, because, I don't know how to end the political polarization in the US.
So worldwide, people are thinking about regulation for AI. Would this be a way to go, or would that not work?
Well, again, I'd say the misinformation thing happened without any help from AI.
Yeah, but AI can help spread it because they know where engagement is and they can put more in the channels. It has to do a little bit with AI, at least.
It could in the future. That's not the phenomena that we have today. So however we solve the digital misinformation that is a factor in polarization, you'll have to take AI into consideration. But our generation, which has done great digital work, has left a few things that we have not solved, and that there's a lot of youthful ingenuity that should tackle this problem.
What exactly did you not solve?
The misinformation that digital channels can magnify, and people can just have confirmation bias of only seeing the stuff they agree with and get kind of outraged in a way that drives political polarization.
Just a quick question to that. In that climate, was it a good idea for Elon Musk to buy Twitter?
Well, he was doing so well with SpaceX, Starlink, and Tesla. I don't know if he would do it again. He hesitated and then he jumped in. But it's up to him how he spends his time. Certainly, the time he spent creating Tesla, creating SpaceX is, it's a phenomenal piece of work.
You publish quite often about books you're reading, and you said you were reading quite a few books about China and thought a lot about the increasing tensions between the US and China, and we've just seen last weekend where that can lead everything. So you have called this conflict a lose-lose situation. Are we now on the road to such a scenario of no return? Or do you see
I hope not, and we shouldn't be. The goals that the people in China have, and the goals the people in Europe have, the goals the people in the US have, I don't see them conflicting. That is, there's not a shortage of land or minerals. That means that, we have to think of being at war with each other. We all should work on climate change and terrorism and education and health technology. So, I'm for toning down the rhetoric, but it's not headed in that direction.
I have because this whole conflict has a tech dimension as well. The unbundling on the one hand is economic unbundling, but also it has a tech dimension when it comes to AI, because billions of people are using the AI of Western companies, and billions of people maybe might use the AI of Chinese companies, and these systems might not even be able to communicate with each other anymore. So what does that mean for the world? What does that mean for culture when societies are run on systems that are complete unbundled? So how does this world look like?
Well, we've always had cultural differences and different systems. There's no reason to think there won't be, lots of AIs that have different popularity in different countries. I don't see that as an issue. I mean, after all, these AIs are now working in natural language, including doing great translation. So that's not the barrier. The barrier is the willingness to see a shared future in solving tough problems.
Mm. So I know that we have many younger people in the audience here today, and some asked me before questions like, is there a piece of advice you would have for them, some mistake you made they should avoid? Is there something that comes to your head that you would like to leave with our audience here today?
Well, I was very lucky, to get in the software industry early and build a company around that and then move on to my philanthropic work. If my ability to work with different types of personalities, I wish I had been better than that. I've learned over the years, and particularly in the foundation work, we need all sorts of thinking styles and people who work in the field, people who know the science, and so when I started the company, I was 19 years old, and I wish, as a manager, I'd learned those lessons earlier. I wouldn't go back and change things because, I was so lucky in those things. But I do hope people can learn from some of the things that I didn't understand in my 20s.
Mm. You have a blog, as I mentioned already, and in one of your posts, you said, being wealthy makes my life much more comfortable, but not more fulfilling. I find that interesting. What does money mean to one of the richest people on earth?
Well, for me, it's very simple. It means that the work the Gates Foundation does, both because of my commitment to the Gates Foundation to give essentially all my wealth there, and the incredible generosity of Warren Buffett to give a substantial portion of his wealth there. It means that we can go after malnutrition. It means we can help with the next generation of crops that withstand climate and help women farmers in poor countries. And so the wealth is all about letting the foundation be ambitious. We're trying to cure HIV, we're trying to cure sickle cell, and we've had great success in our health work and great success in our agricultural work. So the wealth is allowing that to move at full speed. We're ramping up where the Gates Foundation will spend over $9 billion a year in just a few years. And, it's a privilege to be able to allocate that money to these causes of inequity.
When I talked about we will have this talk tonight and posted that also in my social networks, I got a couple of messages, and one was ask him that he should give an investment tip for ordinary people, for all the non-billionaires here today. Is there something that comes to your head?
Well, I'm not a professional investor. I make sure that the team of professionals I have are doing a good job, and I pick if things involve new technologies in digital or medicine or climate. I do run that part of the investments. I think it's a hard time in terms of picking investments. The economic cycle has changed. I do think investing in these climate innovators, I do think that will have a good payoff, but it's not without risk. The majority of those companies will fail, and a few will be wildly successful.
Speaking of success, you've seen many successful people in your life. Is there something they all have in common? What is the most critical factor for long-term success? Did you ever think about that?
Well, the people I think who contribute the most are those who are constantly learning, and testing, why, what if things happen the way they predicted, that's one thing. If things surprise them, going in and learning those things. And so I think being a reader, a student, surrounding yourself with people who have more expertise in the key areas, that's part of the reason I love my foundation work. Is there's so many experts on these health issues, and helping to organize them, back them. That's what I'm doing every day.
Obviously, you are a person who's reading a lot. Any book that impressed you a lot in the last couple of weeks we should all know about?
I read Mukherjee is a health author who has a book about the cell. That's a great update. I have one that's called Born. That's about Africa, Born into Blackness. That gives the history of Africa in a way that I had not understood. That was fairly eye-opening. I read a lot of science stuff. Staying up to date there. Things that explain the energy technologies. So my reading list is a little boring, but helps me do my job.
And this is our last question for today. You've recently revealed that you will become a grandfather soon. Before we now wrap up, what is the most important lesson you will try to teach your grandchildren?
Well, a grandparent is a incredible thing, because you see life renewing itself, and that's makes all the stuff we're trying to do to help avoid future problems, kind of concrete. That somebody related to you will live in that world that is being shaped by the decisions we make now. It's just there's kind of an intangible joy to having the family grow like that, and helping your children with their children. I look forward to explaining what things I made mistakes in, and hopefully that next generation can handle better than ours did.
But what is this? What do you think is the most important lesson, or maybe what is the most important skill they have to learn for the world they will grow up in?
Well, the world is changing faster, and so being an ongoing learner, reader, I'd say that's more important than ever. Part of the reason that our foundation is going to we're budgeting to spend all the money in the next 20, 25 years is there will be people in future generations who understand what the problems are there. So ours is dedicated to the causes we have right now. It's a little hard to anticipate what they'll face, but curiosity, learning, investing in yourself, those things are pretty timeless.
But we already see you reading for your grandchildren. Thank you so much for all these insights, for this fireside chat at the Conference Europe 2023. Bill Gates, thank you so much. Have a great day, and we hope to speak soon again.